From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry, Brian Covey has shown what it takes to find your competitive edge. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. Find your competitive edge with Brian Covey.
Hey guys, welcome to the first in-person episode this year for our podcast. So we're switching it up this year. I think I've told most of you, we have decided I need to move away. I've had Zoom fatigue. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it is time to get back in person. And I am honored today. So you guys know I've been working with Roy Vaden and AJ, brand builders. And so I was connected up with a new friend, Lauren Zoeller, who was speaking recently at an event that I unfortunately missed. But today we are going to jump in. We're going to talk about everything from leadership to how she's building schools in Honduras to she's got a podcast. She's spoken at some of the biggest stages, and she's going to talk about not only everything from relationships, leadership, but places in your life today that I think you're going to be able to level up, and you're going to find there are some keys to success, and we're going to give you some of those today. So make sure you tune in. Lauren, welcome in.
I'm so excited to be here.
How about it in person, huh?
I know, crazy. And we're both here in Nashville. Which
is incredible. So for everybody listening, this is the first one. We're in Nashville. We're starting to do these. And what is really cool is I think is we travel around. You get to speak on a lot of places. Mm-hmm. We don't get to slow down sometimes and actually connect with people. Like you're probably recently, you were in the Create conference in Atlanta with all my friends, Ken Jocelyn and all these guys. Gosh, John Maxwell was on there. Ed Milet was on there. Who else was there? Amberly Lago. Oh man,
Carlos Reyes. It was a stacked lineup.
Bomb Squad.
Yeah,
right. They came in. Well, let's jump into that. Let's talk about that experience because now that you are speaking in the podcast, let's talk about because a lot of people today are like, "Hey, I want to become a speaker." How did you get into actually doing that? And let's talk about that experience recently.
Well, I have to plug Rory and AJ for this because they were so pivotal. Brand Builders was incredible in helping me really get my feet underneath me and helping me really put my message in a way that could speak to the world. And so I just jumped in head first. Yeah. You know, I put together a speaking reel and just started to get out there and really put myself in places where I felt like people needed to hear my message. But I will have to say, I mean, not to plug Brand Builders right at the beginning, but Rory and AJ were incredible in helping with that.
Why not plug them? And I think we will talk about them later. So you guys need to tune in because one of the most watched episodes when Rory and Ed Milet went together, it was like this wildfire. So stay tuned because we're going to jump into that later. But let's talk about, you said something that really struck a chord with me because I've been going through that as well. It's like finding my unique message. And for many of us, we're like, man, we've been called, we've had these experiences. We're like, what do I even speak about? What would people care about? Maybe I'm just like everyone else. Like we start all this internal talk. What made you do it? And then what was that process like to really clarify your message to get to where you are today?
Yeah. So what I speak about on stage is the hardest part of what I've had to go through as a human being. Truly, it's my own vulnerable story and being able to dissect all of the really hard moments that got me to where I am today. I mean, when you hear me speak on stage, I talk about there was one day in my life where everything came crashing down. I was $30K in debt in my business. My accountant had called me. I was dating a man at the time who his mother called me that day to let me know that he was going to his 6th trip of rehab in that year. And I ended up finding out that I had a potential cancer scare.
Wow. All in one day.
All in one day, in 24 hours. And so I hid that part of myself for so long, but that truly was the catalyst that led me into the work that I do today, which is helping people understand that you can heal, you can have this incredible life if you really look at the nervous system. Mm-hmm. And it was that moment, that rock bottom moment, that truly led me into the work that I do now. And when I was putting together my speech, Rory and AJ were like, you got to get real.
Yeah. You
got to talk about the stuff that's hard. And that's always the stuff that connects with people. So I would suggest if you're out there and you're trying to put your message into the world, you got to get real with yourself.
Yeah.
The hard stuff.
So that was back, 2018 for you? So I think about that's 4 or 5 years now into the, really 5 years in a month.
Yeah.
And so you've been through this journey. What have you learned going through now that you're saying sharing it real? Because I think most people don't understand, like a lot of us start one place with our message. And then over time, we start to realize the more we share and the more we really give the details, it starts to help. What does that journey look like for you over almost 5 years of sharing that story?
A lot of therapy.
Yeah, right?
A lot of therapy.
Yeah.
A lot of really looking at, okay, what stories did I create about myself in not sharing this? And how has that kept me from really being able to step fully into my mission? Because I truly believe that the most influential people in the world are the ones who are the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
The ones who truly, truly share what happens. But oftentimes that comes with all kinds of triggers and baggage and all of it.
All of our stories.
All of our stories. So the more that you can take it piece by piece, but also do it in a way that it feels safe to you, which a lot of people I don't think understand what safety really feels like.
Yeah.
You know, the better it can be, but you've got to be able to have that support, which is why coaching and mentoring is so important.
I love it. So I want to throw one out at you that I hear a lot. The stories that we tell ourselves, right? And it's often been said that the way that we look back on the story and our perception of what actually happened could be two different things, right? So how have you learned, and what advice would you give to people out there that are like, you know, I'm battling these stories. I keep having these repeating themes and patterns of I'm telling myself I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough for this. You know, all these things traumatically happen. What can they do to take power back to move forward?
So this is big because I often say that we are not what has happened to us. We are the stories that we have created around what has happened to us. And those stories, whether we want to believe it or not, they stem from something that happened in childhood. All of them. So if you're not doing the work to really look at where did these stories start? Because they don't just start when the quote unquote traumatic event happened.
That's right.
We're reliving it every single day. So you've got to start doing that deeper work and really looking at where did this start in my relationship to my parents, my relationship to peers, and my relationship to other people in my life, romantic relationships. You've got to start digging out those stories. And most people are too afraid to go there.
Yeah. I've heard it said, and my dad's a psychologist, right? So I tell people, it's like I had a little bit of a competitive edge and advantage because it's like in-house therapy from a kid. But I would also say at the same time, like he was learning that, you know, differently because usually his audience or people who come in, they were adults. They weren't kids, right? So we all kind of learn as we go through. As you look at those stories that people are telling themselves, they go back to it. The ages I've often heard is like that 8 to 13, somewhere around there. Could be a little earlier, could be, but somewhere in there. Is that typically the range?
Usually we say that with children between the ages of 0 and 7 is truly when your brain is learning how to relate to yourself and also relate to others. Yeah. So a lot of the work that I do is based in somatic therapy, which is therapy of the nervous system. And we know that if you have an emotionally unavailable parent, or if you have a parent who is abusive, not because it's just what they learned, right? It's the way that they learned to cope with the world, then that in essence, you're going to learn how to survive between the ages of 0 and 7. You're going to learn how to love yourself and learn how to love others during that time frame. So that's actually the most pivotal time, is between the moment you're born and 7 years old, because your tiny little nervous system is trying to figure out how to survive in the world. So if you've had some sort of trauma during that time in your life, chances are you're going to be acting that out in your adult relationships too. So it's important that you go back and look.
Isn't that interesting? You know, I know my wife, Nicole, and I say this all the time. We had our first 2 kids early and like only 18 and a half, 19 months apart. Then we had a 7-year gap. And I think about, I know for me, Nicole was an awesome parent on all 3. Me, not so good on the first 2. I'm so new. And you think about these 0 to 7 new parents. Holy cow. We're throwing in a new baby, new parents, all of this. So let's speak to the parents, because a lot of our audience, maybe you're new, first child coming, or they've got them in that 0 to 7 bucket. What should they be looking for as parents, and how can they maybe change the trajectory, right? Because they're reliving some of their childhood, but man, most of us want to go a different direction if it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah. So I would say that the number one thing that you can do is you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a term in somatic experiencing and somatic therapy called co-regulation. That means that my nervous system is co-regulating with yours. So little babies from the moment of inception are co-regulating with their mother's nervous system. So if you have a mom who's stressed out all the time, if you have a mom who's grieving something really traumatic, that baby is picking up on all of those sensations and all of those emotions. So the number one thing that you can do is you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to find and access safety within your own body so that your baby can pick up on that.
Yeah.
And that blows people's minds because we try to think about all these things that we need to do to parent better. Right. All this whole list of things that we need to do, and really take care of yourself. That's the number one thing that you can do.
Isn't that it? Because you often will hear, okay, this is the parenting style you should do. This is how you should discipline your kids and all this stuff. But they forget and they go, man, mom and dad aren't physically fit. Mom and dad don't eat healthy. Mom and dad are stressed out all the time. They come home and whatever that environment is, and they go, wow, that's the energy.
Right.
And we were on a call yesterday with, I know Dave Meltzer, right? Dave talks about energy a lot. So I'm curious, how does that correspond? How does that correlate to what you're talking about, central nervous system and all that, to what we often reference is you can feel people's energy.
Yeah.
Right. As we get older, like now I'm very well aware. 0 to 7, maybe not. But as the parents are listening, it's like, how do they control that energy in a positive way?
Yeah. So you've got to figure out what works for you. And what works for you doesn't always work for everyone else. So there's a term called ventral vagal connection, which just means safety within the nervous system. And if we look at the nervous system and the way that the nervous system works, it really is in charge of two things and two things only: getting you the heck out of Dodge when there's threat present, and helping you rest, digest, and access safety when all is peachy. We want to aim to live the majority of our life in safety, in ventral vagal connection.
Yeah.
However, the majority of us are constantly trying to get away from the bear.
Yeah.
We're living in this state of high activation and sympathetic or parasympathetic activation. And so when we're in that space, we can't actually function. Our brain goes offline.
Okay.
We're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to resource yourself to ask constantly, am I in safety right now? It's not that activation's bad.
Sure.
It's just that we're not meant to live there all the time, but the majority of us do.
Yeah.
So some great resourcing principles. You got to figure out what works for you. Deep breathing.
Yeah.
Yoga, exercise, stillness, dancing, meditation, anything that can bring your nervous system into that state of safety and stillness. That's how you shift your energy, because it's in that place that you can co-regulate and teach your children and teach others around you what safety looks like.
Love that. So we often hear about this, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, one of the most polarizing posts that I've done, but I've seen it more recently, is this whole kind of hustle culture, right? And I've had so many people say, man, you just got to hustle for 5 years and then you're just going to be a multimillionaire and it's magically going to happen. And they're like, there is no burnout. There is nothing wrong with hustle 24/7. And I'm thinking, as you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know too many people that have actually survived that without a massive crash.
Yeah.
And they've gone through. So let's dive into that, because I think a lot of people are thinking, man, I've just got to hustle my way to get there. And they hear you talk about stillness. And I think there's a blend of that, of like seasons in my life that I've been hustling, but I also had rest periods that were very intentional so that I didn't crash and burn. So how does that look for you and blend together?
Yeah. Well, just as I was speaking about, there is such a thing as healthy activation.
Yeah.
And you need to tap into that in order to get things done. In order to get things done in your career, in order to show up for your kids, in order to show up for your significant other, you just have to figure out, what does healthy activation look like?
Yeah.
And when do you hit the moment where you feel like, wait a second, this is too much, right? For me, my digestion immediately goes out the window, right? I start to feel like butterflies in my stomach. I know
Sure.
I've been working too much,
Yeah.
right? Or I start to feel just really stressed and overwhelmed. And so I know that that is my trigger point. And I know in that moment, I need to go resource. I need to go do the things we just spoke about. And I think where a lot of entrepreneurs get it wrong is that they push through that threshold.
Yeah.
They don't know their body. They don't know how to listen to it. They don't know how to resource. And so they just get caught up in the hamster wheel.
That's
and
right.
they don't know when that trigger point and that trip wire really starts to hit.
But we've heard, and I've heard it, is just increase your capacity. You can do more, right? Like it's like endurance. The more you can do and fit in. And I'm like, yeah. And I've seen some people not be able to fit it in, and then the rest of their life starts to suffer as they go through. So let's go back to your message a little bit, because I love that you speak on these things, but I want to unpack this. I know people would be mad if I didn't bring it up, but working with brand builders, right? So you start to clarify your message. We were talking about that, and now you're speaking. So I want to give some people some insight into like, okay, like she knows what she's talking about. This is going to be deep. But how did you start to work with brand builders, and what made you aware that, hey, I need help on this journey? I'm not just going to try to figure it out by myself, which a lot of us try to do.
Yeah, we do. I'm trying to think. Gosh, I've been with brand builders for almost 3 years.
That's
which
awesome.
is wild.
Yeah.
So wild to me. And I actually had a dear friend, Tori Gordon. I don't know if you know
Yep.
Tori. Tori led me to brand builders, and she said, look, they are helping me so much with my podcast. They're helping me really fine tune my message. And I was in a space where I had made my way into, I was working as a somatic therapist, and I had made my way into helping people, but I didn't really know how to take what I was doing
Yeah.
and get it so that people could understand it
Right.
in a way.
Right.
Right. And so that truly is what brand builders help me do. They help me sit down and say, okay, these are all these fancy words that you're using that nobody knows what they mean.
Sure.
But this is how they relate to the everyday person. And actually, Elle, who's on,
Yeah.
who you know,
Yeah.
she introduced us. Elle was one of my clients, which was beautiful. So she was like, I
That's
can
awesome.
actually take what you do and make it make sense. And so that's when I started to kind of hone into my message, because I think so many of us are just out there blindly just leading, but we
Yeah.
don't necessarily know what we're leading or how
Yes.
we're leading.
Yeah.
And so that's really how brand builders help me
Yeah.
tie that in.
That hope strategy that we've all
Mhm.
tried. We've all been there. And I see this more and more now. People, they either want to speak, they want to do a podcast, they want to write a book, they want to do all these things that you're doing, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, man, how do I jump from where I am to get there? And they think, well, I'm just going to pop up on stage. I'm just going to talk.
way.
Like, ooh, if you hear anything today about that, we're going to unpack some of it. But I want you to know, like, everyone you see on stage has spent countless hours you've probably never seen. It's like that athlete I think about when it's not even the required training.
Mhm.
They're just out there putting reps in.
Yeah.
And so to get better as a speaker, let's kind of move from, you've met brand builders, you're starting to clarify your message, you're getting that. How have you really intentionally worked on your speaking? Because by the way, I heard some phenomenal compliments at
Oh,
Create. And so I just
thank
thought,
you.
man, I wish I was there. I caught some snippets,
Yeah.
but how have you consistently, continue to improve as a speaker?
Yeah. I'll tell you, my journey was really diving into coaching first and getting my message came from being able to serve others for as long as I did.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that step up on the stage and they want to give this grandiose message, but there's no tactful way to do it if you haven't served other people and you don't know
Yeah.
what they're struggling with. So really, I was in a space when I came to brand builders, I had a really booming coaching business. All my programs were full. I was serving hundreds of women and men.
Wow.
And I had to figure that part out first,
Mhm.
really figure out what was my message and how can I help people? What is my, as brand builder says, what's that one word, that unique thing
Yeah.
that I can help serve people in doing? And that has been the undercurrent in everything that I've done. All of my speaking engagements, even when I speak on podcasts, it's like
Yeah.
I'm talking about worthiness
Yeah.
and helping people access that. So you really need to dive in, I think,
Mhm.
and see, how do you serve people? How do you serve people? And from there, then your message can come through and you can speak on stage.
And I love that too, because that's been a theme I've seen is the best speakers, they do have results. They've actually
Yeah.
produced something. They have people, there's fruit out there that I go, man, if they're speaking on leadership, for example, which I know we'll unpack, it's like, wow, they actually produce leaders.
Right.
They've actually done it. It's not like, hey, I've read these books on leadership. I read all of John Maxwell's books. I'm equipped.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, let's not do that.
Yeah.
So as you prep for a speech, I would be curious, what do you have a routine? Do you have something that you go through, right, to get ready? Because I know I get asked this lately of, how do you prep?
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah,
It's so hard.
It's a lot of hours.
oh my gosh. And it's so different for every human.
Yeah.
I do have a process. I usually write out my speeches. I'll type them and then I'll actually handwrite them.
Yeah.
That's the best way to lock it into my brain. And then after I handwrite it, it's repetition.
Yeah.
I pull my people together. I will do the speech for them before I get on a stage. And the more that and here's something else I'll say. When I first started speaking, I was so consumed with getting it right. I would outline the entire speech and getting it right. And there is this beautiful thing that happens on stage if you are a Christian or if you believe in God, the universe. It all kind of goes out the window.
Doesn't it though?
when you step on stage and you have it, it's in your body,
Yeah.
but something else takes over. God speaks through you.
Yeah.
And so I will tell people, if you're just getting into the speaking world, outline it, know it in your body, but also surrender it the moment that you step on stage, because God will speak right through you when it's time.
It's one of my favorite things anybody said, because I've said that and I believe that. Like I've shown up and I'll tell people, I don't really remember what I said the last 10 or 15 minutes, because it just was in such a flow state that we talk about. It's like, it was just when I was feeding off the energy. I was reading people going, okay, am I locked in with them? Is this making sense? Like, where do they want to go? Are they leaning in, or are they like, oh man, this is not what's there? So last question on speaking. So I know a lot of people want to do it. If you were to start over and you're starting your speaking journey, what would you do different?
Honestly, I don't know. I think I did a little bit of speaking before I found Brand Builders.
Sure.
And that was such a huge catalyst for me. And really being able to land the structure, whether you want to believe it or not, there is a powerful structure to building a speech and having it land.
Yes.
And most people don't know that structure. And Rory's the best in the world. Like, who else are you going to learn from, right? Other than Rory Vaden. So before I had that structure, I would say, my speaking was good, but now it's great because I have that structure. So I would say that would probably be what I did that, but I would have done it sooner.
Yeah. I would land that one, because for most people, you're right, they have no structure to it. It's like, we're going to kind of start with an intro. We've got the body of the message, and I'm going to close. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Let's help you. So, hey guys, a little plug for Rory. Go check that out, and we'll do that. So one of your talks that really was intriguing to me, because I know our audience will love this, is around leadership right now. And I will just say, in our industry, mortgage, real estate, and all that I work, financial services right now, there seems to be this gap, right? I mean, the average age is over 50. You've got a lot of people that are still not even technologically, they're not on social media. They have no personal brands. Like, the list goes on and on and on of how they want to, what I say, manage versus lead today. Let's talk about some leadership today, because I think it's desperately needed. I hopped off a call on my way over here, and it was around leadership. And I'm thinking, the gap is widening.
I know.
Right?
It's getting so big.
So what's your perspective right now as you look at just the overall landscape? We'll start kind of 30,000 foot view of like, what are your beliefs around leadership?
So what I think is happening right now in the leadership space is, I think, just as you said, there's a huge gap because there are a lot of leaders who are not embodied. They're not embodied, which means they don't know how to access safety within themselves. They're just regurgitating. And it's not coming from a place of, okay, I know what it feels like to be safe inside. I know how it feels to lead from a space of safety and to lead from a place of authenticity and vulnerability. And I feel like that gap is getting so huge, and that we don't have leaders who are embodied and authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you can't lead. You can't lead from that space if you're just regurgitating. So that's where I feel like there's a huge gap right now, is that we really need more leaders who have actual results, who aren't just regurgitating information that they learned, but also know how to be that source of safety for themselves so that they can lead others to do the same. Because you can't lead others to be vulnerable and authentic if you yourself are not vulnerable and authentic.
I mean, oh wow, we could go so many places. So I think about three things pop up as you're talking. This is huge, I think, for people. Simon Sinek, when the Start With Why came out, right? And he was talking about the infinite game versus the finite game. All these things I start thinking about. He's one of the few leaders that stepped out and has talked about safety, right? And that golden circle to me, even though it went into more of like the culture and the sales, I'm like, I think to myself, the safety is what matters. And I know as I was coming up in corporate America for 13 years, it was very much, you do not have a relationship outside the office with your boss. Like, your boss does not check in on you. They weren't even really, if they asked about your family, it was more of like, let me check the box. There were a few leaders and mentors, I will say, complete exceptions, and opened my eyes to like, wow, I do trust you now. Like, you do care about me. And they went through that. So do you think that's where some of it stemmed from? As I know early in my career, this was not a safe environment in corporate America.
Yeah.
No one was vulnerable.
Right.
Right. You look at your leaders going, well, I want to be like them and move up the corporate ladder, so I need to be like them. So we just repeated it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'll also say to that the most compassionate, and Brene Brown says this in her studies on leadership, that the most compassionate people are the most boundaried. You can still be a strong leader and know safety and hold others in that safety and be really boundaried and have really strong boundaries around what is okay and what is not okay, and teach the other people that you are leading what that looks like for themselves too. So I think that really where the divide has come into play is that you can still be authentic and lead and have a sense of strong presence as a leader. And that has just become misconstrued. And I think, to your point, absolutely, the corporate world has just been in this go, 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 hyper masculine, in their masculine, right?
Yeah.
And people are just trying to achieve all the time. We still need softness in leadership. We still need that space of vulnerability. And it's finding the edge between the two that I feel leadership is missing.
So I talk about this quite a bit, and this is started to circle back to, we rebranded the show, Finding Your Competitive Edge, right? I started thinking about, when you're saying that, it was just recently my coach was helping with, hey, you can be that leader and have your boundaries. Because I'm like, look, I got 3 kids. My wife and I want to do these things. Like, I want to invite people in, but there are boundaries to this, right? Like, they're not just walking in my house to a barbecue uninvited. Like, we have some boundaries in life. Like, they're not calling me at 10 o'clock at night, just randomly over and over and over. What are some boundaries for people that are listening, they're a leader, that you would recommend that they do set to kind of start to frame that up? Because they probably don't know where to start on that.
Yeah. Well, before I even dive into some examples, I'll say that when you set a boundary, you're saying, okay, this is okay for me and this is not okay for me. And what it actually does is it gives permission to the person you are leading to also have those same boundaries for themselves, to start saying yes to themselves.
Yeah.
So I always suggest, and even anybody that's on my leadership team in my company, we have strong boundaries around when people can contact us. It's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. And after that time, it goes off. Like, we're silent. And we're really, really, and that's just something important for all of us, even with my clients.
Yeah.
They know that they can't do that, because that gives me the space, but also gives them the space to be able to take care of themselves as well.
Right.
I would also say, from a leadership perspective, really understanding what your role is and knowing this is what I do in my position and this is what I don't do in my position, and setting those strong boundaries so that someone else can then take on what they need to take on within your company. So that's really where I would start. And then also, personal boundaries are just super important. You've got to take time for yourself. I have a really strong boundary. My team knows that they cannot contact me before 10 a.m. usually during the weekday, because that's when I'm doing my thinking and planning time.
Sure.
So you just have to decide what supports you in that safety conversation that we had earlier.
Yeah, it all is tying back to the safety piece, which you mentioned role clarity. We're going through this with our organization because we're about to double in size and all these things are happening. It's like, hold on, what you did before, now this is what you're really good at and this is where we need you now. And we're starting to define that. And what I realized is most organizations, they don't have true role clarity. And so everybody's like, well, hold on, I thought you were doing that. Hold on, I thought, well, am I doing that? Or we don't even really know what we're good at, nor are we playing in our sweet spot in that zone where I'm thinking what's there. So for people, listen, they're a leader today. Let's say they have leaders on their team. How do they start to define what the roles are? Because that sounds really simple, but I don't think it's that simple.
It's not. It's not. And it works different for every organization. So I'll tell you, because I had my own struggle with this. Being a business owner, I am the visionary of my business, and I have someone who executes my vision. Right? Like my right-hand person, Jess, she is my COO. She's my operations girl. She gets things done because I can't. But in order for me to get to that space, I had to have a really hard conversation with myself, because we as entrepreneurs and we as leaders think we can do it all.
Oh, don't we? Right.
We really think that we can do it all. And so I had to get clear on, what do I actually, A, want to do, and B, what am I really good at doing? There's a fantastic assessment out there called the Wealth Dynamics Assessment. Have you heard of it?
I've not.
Okay.
Okay.
It's amazing. You should.
Dynamics.
The Wealth Dynamics.
Okay.
And
we'll link it.
Yeah, you should link it. Look at it. It's incredible. It helped me so much. When I took that assessment, I realized that I was a star. And the star is the face of the business. right? This is the reason I'm on stages. It's the reason I'm on podcast interviews.
Right.
It's the reason that I have a social media presence. I shine and I create wealth and impact by being a star. My right-hand person, Jess, she's a mechanic. So she tested as a mechanic, which means she's in charge of all the operations,
Yes.
right? So when you really can understand what your strengths are, I believe that you can start to create that role for yourself based on those strengths. So the wealth dynamics helped us tremendously.
So you all took it together.
We all took it together.
Wow. And then you shared your results.
Yep.
Impactful. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that. We used to do that with Disc Profile. We would do it with Myers-Briggs. And I remember that was the coolest thing. You're all sharing going, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody was so proud of like, here's my test result.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, the cool thing too about it is that you can use it for future hires when you're setting up your team.
Yeah.
Right? Like I know that I have a supporter that handles all of my coaching programs because she's a supporter. She loves to coach. Not that I don't love to coach. I can coach, but it's not my favorite thing to do. I'd rather be the star, right? Yeah. So if you can just really figure out what your role is and set clear boundaries around it, that's how you build a strong foundation for a team.
I love this. I know we could go deeper on this, but you've got me thinking because this comes up a lot too. And I want to make sure I ask you is leadership and now personal branding. Because this has been, I've noticed, one, some leaders are not even on social.
Yeah.
Some leaders that are on there, it's like, I don't even know why they're on there. And you got this whole other group now that's starting to come about that they're sharing what they believe. They're talking about everything, their experiences that can help other people, whether on their team or not. What do you think's happening around that leadership and personal branding today? And maybe some recommendations for some leaders, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you can truly step into your reach as a leader without having a personal brand. It just kind of is the way that it is.
I agree.
And I think if there's a lot of people out there that are fighting that, they don't want it.
Why?
I don't know. I know.
They're afraid of the camera?
They're afraid of the camera.
Yeah.
They're afraid. But again, you can be a leader and still have a personal brand and not necessarily be in front of the camera. There's other ways to do it. Yeah. You just have to figure out what works well for you. I mean, I think about there are some of the leaders that I follow, right? Like Mark Groves, in the relationship space, the holistic psychologist, right? Dr. Nicole LePera. Oh, yeah. She created her personal brand and her following off of educational blocks on Instagram, right? Like her face wasn't even, she didn't start putting her face out there until she had over 1 million followers. But she was able to get her message out in a way as a leader that people started to listen to. Wow. So I think when it comes to building a personal brand, what I would tell people, if you don't want to be on camera, don't be on camera. But you got to get your message out there. Yeah. You have to build some sort of a brand behind your message because that truly, if you are a leader and you want to share that with the world, we're all on social media,
So we find people.
Yeah.
And I told a story recently. We have hired in the shortest amount of time over $1 billion in mortgage production annually, which in my first company was almost 10 years to get to that. Mm-hmm. Then the next company was like 4 years, right? I mean, and this one was almost 90 days. Wow. And I attribute it to personal brand.
Yes.
Because the amount of people that reached out that I didn't know, or they're like, oh, you've moved. And so anybody doubting it out there, I'll just tell you, I just went through this. And so I want to ask you this because you're building your personal brand. I think it's a journey, right? It's no destination to it.
Always.
If you're a leader out there, and let's start with two camps, the new one or the ones that are experienced, what would be some recommendations for them that you would say, we talked about not being on camera. That's okay, different things there. But anything else you would say, hey, here are some best practices. Here's where people actually care that your audience would want to hear from you about. What should they even be talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you got to figure out your why. And you got to figure out your message. Like we were talking about earlier,
Yes.
That's the first thing. And then I always say messy action. You just got to get out there and you've got to share it. Something really important that Ed Milet actually talked about on stage last week. He talked about how his whole journey of how he became who he is and built his personal brand is insane because I'm pretty sure he's never actually touched Instagram. Right?
No, he probably doesn't have his login, right?
No, he doesn't. Yeah. I think his son was posting for him,
yeah.
right? But he said, you've got to be in the business of showing people how to have more happiness. Because I don't care what type of leader you are. I don't care what you're doing out in the world. You've got to be in the business of showing people how they can have greater happiness in their life. Yeah. So if you don't have your message and you don't have your why yet, and you haven't really dug into it, or if you're an experienced leader and you're trying to figure out how to get your message out into the world, messy action and think about how can I make people's lives better? And just start sharing from that space. Yeah. Because the rest will fall into place. When I first got on social media, I don't even know what I was sharing about. I think I was sharing yoga poses or something, right. But it has evolved over time as I have evolved and as people have come to me saying, hey, this really changed my life. Thank you.
Yeah. Powerful. Let's talk about your why. Because I know we were talking earlier about the schools in Honduras and what you're doing there. And as I was prepping, I always love to find those things of to your point, what are people doing? Because once you find success and you've got the money and all that, you realize, okay, there's more in this life. I think God's called us to do more. And that's why he blesses certain people to go, hey, let's go do some things. Yeah. Let's impact the world. Yeah. So let's talk about these schools and what you're doing. Yeah.
So the work that I teach with all of my programs, and even if you hear me speak on stage, is that I want people to understand that they can self-heal. Right? That they truly can have everything that they want in their life if they just do the work to heal their nervous system. Because truly, I feel like that's the missing piece. And so every person that goes through one of my programs, that enrolls in and says yes to healing themselves, we take 6% of every sale and donate it towards a nonprofit organization called the Boundless Foundation. And they build schools in Honduras for underprivileged children.
So good.
Yeah. So we say, listen, if you choose to say yes to your healing, you're also giving a child or a mother or someone who can come in and teach in this community, you're also allowing them to heal. So I believe that healing, when you say yes to your healing, it really is a ripple effect. And that's my why. I want everyone to have access to this work.
Love it. I was thinking about it this morning as I was prepping. It's you have a coaching platform and a larger platform now, of course, but it has a purpose behind it. And so everybody listen, I would just encourage you, if your solution and what you're trying to get to is just to make money on the other side, you can do that. You'll figure that out. People can teach you that. But if you don't have the purpose behind it, the fulfillment and really the joy of what I think can come out of it, it's going to be empty. It's going to lack. And so, as you look at what you've set up with that, with your purpose, I'm curious what's next for you, because you're doing so many things. You're at the coaching and the podcast, you've TV stuff on here, and you're doing all these things. Yeah. What is next?
Well, I have a book coming out.
I heard.
Yeah. So I have a book, which is
cool.
I'm really excited about. We're about halfway done writing it, which has been such a journey. Such a journey. If you've ever written a book before, it's wild.
Yeah.
You get halfway through the book and you're like, wow, I have so much more to say. And then that's the next book. Yes. Right? You got to start working on the next book. So I have a book that's coming out. And we're just continuing to expand. Our goal this year for working with the Boundless Foundation is that we want to build 4 schools.
Love that.
So we have already built number 1. And we are in February. So we've got 3 more to go for this year, which is really exciting. And then my podcast is actually relaunching this year, which is an exciting thing because we had it for years. We're doing something similar. We're going into in-person and relaunching it with new branding. So there's just a lot on the horizon this year, just continuing to expand.
So I love these questions, these last 2. This gives a little kind of a closing ideas of everything we've talked about. I think people are going to want to rewind and go back through because I love that we were able to cover depth, but also several topics I think are relevant. I always love people that have truths in their life, that they know something to be true. If you were to leave something and say, hey, this was my one truth that throughout all my experiences, everything I've done, I think it's part of finding that competitive edge of what's that one truth that you hold to?
What is meant for you will never pass you.
Say that again.
What is meant for you will never pass you.
Okay. Expand on that a little bit. I got to know.
Yeah. So I think that so many of us as leaders and as spouses and achievers, right? We're always gripping. We're always trying so hard to figure out how can I make this next revenue number, or how can I have deeper connection with my wife, or how can I actually find someone to do life with? We're always in this race
Yeah.
And we're trying to grip on how we can control what's meant for us. And if you truly have faith, and faith is the cornerstone of everything that you do, it doesn't matter what you're doing, what is meant for you is not going to pass you. And if you can just continue to surrender to that as an entrepreneur and just show up and give it your best, you're going to have everything that you want. Because if you really truly have faith and you believe in God and the universe, what's meant for you is not going to pass you. It can't. And if it does pass you, it wasn't meant for you.
I love that one. That one's gonna stick. I'm gonna share that one. Okay, so last one, because I could go deeper on that one, but I think that's gonna leave some people. So over the past few years, I've noticed in my own journey, some beliefs have changed, like things that were instilled in me, maybe as a kid, or people had told me coming through corporate America. I'm always curious of people that have like changed their belief on something that they once believed, and especially since 2018, in 5 years, you've gone through a massive transformation. What's something maybe you believed that now you go, yeah, that's not really true?
Ooh, this is a good question. To come full circle, that you have to hustle for success.
I do like that.
I stepped into some of my greatest moments as an entrepreneur, as far as money is concerned, as far as, fame is concerned and getting out into the world, when I was doing the least. When I had actually stepped back and allowed myself to surrender and again go back to not gripping what I was working for, all of that I really wanted for myself was able to come in when I was doing less, when I started taking care of myself, not from controlling everything that was happening outside of me. And that's a super hard concept to tap into. But to me, it is the secret to success, is to learn how to surrender when it's time, because that's when everything comes in.
Oh, I love that. Because I do think people, if you read the definition of hustle, I actually saw somebody post it this morning. And I think for many of us, understanding what does that hustle actually look like? And one of my buddies, Anthony Trucks, talks about this hustle harmony, right? And I really adopted that a couple of years ago when he shared it. I was like, I get that. Like there's times to really be full sprint mode and in it. There's times to slow it back down. There's times to be in that mid-grade mode where I'm like, man, if you understand your rhythm to it, you can hustle without the downsides
for sure
that we hear about.
And it's important too, not to go into a tangent because it'd probably be a whole other podcast, but it's women have to lead differently than men. It's just the way that it is. That would be a
whole other show.
It's a whole other show, right? So we have to make sure that we think about that too, because men are designed to really step into their purpose, and they can hustle harder than we can. We have to take breaks. Our bodies won't actually allow it. So finding that balance, men need to surrender too.
Yeah.
But maybe not as much as women.
Yeah. Oh, that could be that could be another book too, by the way.
It's totally good.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but hey, we've got that. We got that. Okay. So I know people are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to find out more about your coaching programs, hear about the book when it launches, podcast coming back out. Yeah. Where is the best place to connect with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Lauren Zoeller. I'm also on TikTok at Coach Lauren Zoeller. And then everything that you need to know about the podcast, which is called the Aligned to Love podcast, it's on my website at laurenzoeller.com.
I love it. Lauren, it's been a wonderful conversation. I knew it would be awesome. When Elle introduced us, I'm like, okay. And then I told Rory and AJ, I was like, oh, Brian, this is going to be a great one. So
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you for delivering and adding value, because as we started this journey, it was like, how do we bring wonderful people, share their stories, connection points, and show them that we're all a lot alike.
Yeah.
But through that journey, we've learned things. And if we were to share them, collectively, we get to move forward.
I agree completely. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been awesome. Guys, we will catch you on the next episode. And remember, we've changed the name over to Finding Your Competitive Edge. We're doing them local in Nashville. So if you're in the Nashville area or know somebody that needs to be on the show, reach out to us and we will make sure that we get you connected up. Have a great and blessed day. Talk to you later.